My name is Lacey Leone McLaughlin. I'm an executive coach guiding top leaders in all sectors, and I've been doing it for over 20 years. And well, apparently, I'm a podcaster too. I really wasn't planning on doing a second season of this show, but we had such an overwhelming amount of positive feedback with everybody asking me when more seasons were coming. So, well, here we are. Welcome to season 2. I am so pleased to start the season off with my friend Michael Ouweleen, who is the current president of Cartoon Network, Adult Swim, and Boomerang, and was the principal force driving the strategy and creative for more than 25 years. Previously, Michael was the vice president of Adult Swim, where he grew Rick and Morty into the #1 comedy in the US and a key member of the small team that championed and launched Adult Swim in the first place. He even co-created and co-wrote one of the first Adult Swim shows, Harvey Birdman, Attorney at Law. Before Cartoon Network, Michael was in advertising in New York, and he started his job by winning a writing contest. Such an accomplished leader, I'm so honored to open the season with him. Welcome, Michael.
Good. I'm honored to be here. Thank you.
Yeah. So I know a lot about you, but our audience doesn't. They've heard a tad bit, but talk to us a little bit about who you are, what you do, and even a tad around your origin story, how you got here.
Okay, great. There was a radioactive spider. No, I'm Michael Ouweleen. I head up Adult Swim and Cartoon Network, and I work with a team at Discovery Family and now Turner Classic Movies as well. I've been here in Atlanta for about 30 years, and I guess I grew up in Rochester, New York, and at the age of 7, saw a Bugs Bunny cartoon, like a lot of us did, and just knew, okay, that's what I'm doing. And very quickly after that, I started drawing, and I had to either Xerox machines were exotic then, so I would have to hand copy comic books that I would make, like a monk making Bibles. I would like illuminate and redraw and recolor by hand comic books that I would make, and then I would go around the neighborhood trying to sell them. Kind of immediately, I was both creating and marketing drawn medium, which is what I've ended up spending almost all my life doing. So I sort of am one of the rare people that knew kind of instantly what I was drawn to and had that focus my whole life. Now, that said, I grew up at a time and in a place where no one had an idea about how to get into this industry that I'm now in. And so I've always been coming at it kind of obliquely. Like I didn't go to school for this. I studied English literature and accidentally theology in school. And then in my first job, I won as kind of a sweepstakes. I won a job in copywriting at J. Walter Thompson in New York by filling out a full page ad in the New York Times that was like, take these 8 tests and see if you can win a job. And I won a job, like a sweepstakes. And the head of that agency later turned out to be, I mean, he was this person, but then he later became James Patterson. He was at the time Jim Patterson. And if this all sounds like a fever dream.
Well, and it's also, I'm like thinking to myself, how do I not know all of this? How am I just
I never told you. I never told you all this because it's a lot to take in and it sounds like I'm making it up. So then
that's a good
I started
story when it sounds fake.
Exactly. So I was always trying to get into animation, but all the adults in my life were sort of like, that's not a real job. And there's, and California doesn't exist. So I just kind of obliquely came at it. And even when I was at that ad agency, I was learning a lot. I learned so much at that ad agency. They did a great job of like teaching new employees the whole thing. And they let me do a pilot at Nickelodeon while I was there. And so I got to do an animated pilot while I was in advertising. And then I found my life calling, which is Cartoon Network, Adult Swim. We were at a Christmas party one year and someone said, who likes animation? Because there's a job in Atlanta. And my now wife, then girlfriend, was like, he does. And we called the headhunter, left a voicemail on an old timey, answering machine. And I went in to see the guy the next Monday. I walked into his office and he said, you're it. I swear to God, he was just like, you got it. And I was like, are we going to look at my portfolio? He's like, no, I can just tell you you're it. And I flew down to Atlanta and interviewed with this guy, Rob Sorcher. And he's like, look, you got the job. And then I interviewed with Betty Cohn, who was the president of the network. And she was a little bit more, a real interviewer on that trip.
So you had to work for it a little bit more with her, huh?
She was, I did have to. I had to explain things in my portfolio, which I was unprepared to do because every step along the way, they're just like, "It's yours. Don't murder anyone, and you'll get the job." So I got the job, and I've just been sort of here ever since, kind of giving everything I have to animation at these animation brands, Cartoon Network and Adult Swim. That's my origin story. Yeah.
That's awesome. That's a good one. You should make an animated cartoon about your origin story and see how it goes.
When young people ask me, look, I want to follow your career, I want to do what you've done. My advice is don't. You can't do it my way. My way's been completely batshit crazy. You've got to do it a different way. Yeah.
And that doesn't even include having a podcast before there was a podcast, before those were a thing. Like there's a lot of other things that I know about. There's a lot of
other things. Yeah.
That is pretty interesting. But what I will say is I like the origin story, and I think it's a good segue into, animator with this very interesting story. And now, for lack of a better word, like big boss. How does that happen? So talk to me a little bit about the transition from uber creative to the role you're in today.
It's a hard transition for creatives to lead, as I think a lot of people know, and a lot of your listeners probably know. I did start out as a creative and tried to hone my chops in terms of creativity. But even early on in advertising, at 23 or 24 years old, they were like, you're going to be a creative director in radio. And so suddenly I was at 24, not knowing anything, like super wet behind my ears, giving notes to 60-year-old copywriters on radio ads. And that was really interesting that J. Walter Thompson gave me that opportunity. Like that was a big risk. And and the support to learn how to give feedback to people in non-threatening ways and try and, help people find sharper ideas and all that. So I started to hone that early on, and, you never perfect it, but so long as you come at things with questions first, what are you trying to get at? What are you trying to say, et cetera? That's kind of the basis I used from 24 all through coming down to Atlanta and being creative director at Cartoon Network for many years. And it kind of evolved over time, my ability to lead a team. And I think because I was never trying to lead a team, I wasn't trying to grab at power or authority and was sort of actually trying to push it off. I feel like I had an easier time actually leading because I wasn't trying to obtain a higher ladder or anything like that. I was actually just trying to get back to writing and was the reluctant leader. So, and I think that you just use as a creative leader, what you try to do is squelch your ego and not make it be about your work product, and make it be about you helping to midwife somebody else and together generate something great. And if you can do that, then you're a strong leader. Early on at Cartoon Network, we decided that every Friday, and this is super goofy, but it totally worked. Every Friday, we were going to have an improv coach come in and have all the writers, all the art directors, all the producers, anybody who works in our team, so non-creative people, quote unquote, and creative people, get together and do improv exercises every Friday. We did this for 2 years. And the benefit of that is still echoing today, because the entire culture here, I like to think, is yes and. And it's not trying to say a funny thing, it's trying to listen and respond to something someone else is saying. And we all learned that the production people and the finance people are the funniest people, actually, So
yeah, that's awesome. That's awesome. So what jumped out to me is getting work done through others and coaching and supporting them to do their best. How did it feel for you not doing the work? I mean, ultimately you're doing the work product is you're responsible for. I get that. But I think from a creative perspective, when you stopped writing as much as you wanted to write, when you stopped creating as much as you wanted to create, but you were seeing that and getting it through others. What was that feeling, and how did you get to a place where you're like, okay, this is okay, this works for me?
It was very frustrating for maybe 15 years.
Okay.
And I felt like, because I was a responsible person, that I was being punished by not being able to just be a pure creative, because I wasn't bratty and throwing tantrums or whatever, and wasn't a prima donna and was reasonable, that I was being punished by being in a leadership role. But I did get great opportunities. I got to write and produce with a good friend, my best friend, and a great team of people, our own series. Now, that was at night and on weekends for me. I was running a department when I did that. It was not my full-time job. And that was super gratifying. And that was like, okay, I've done it. And we did a good job, and it worked out. And okay. And then sort of at the tail end of that, I had kids, and my wife and I had 3 boys. And as anyone listening knows who's a parent, at some point in that journey, you realize, hey, this is not about me. Like, the entirety of what I'm doing is not about me. Mm-hmm. And I really internalized that. And my need to write and produce my own creative as just kind of went away over a couple of years. And my entire mindset about it changed. And now I'm at the point where I would feel very odd writing and producing creative stuff. I feel like I've done my part. You don't need to hear anything from me anymore. And that my job is to maximize what other people can do creatively.
Yeah. Yeah. It's interesting, not about me. And you wonder if more leaders had that approach and it was less ego and not about me, what we could be doing differently and how we could get out of our own way.
I think that's what we're seeing in the news today, and probably in the news whenever this is released, that a lot of what's broken about leadership right now is that people think it's about obtaining top-down power. And I think we have very vivid examples lately of leadership is bottom up. You have to have the trust in individual people around you, and they have to know they can rely on you and trust you. And that's where your power comes from. Your power doesn't come from a title or from having been in a position for a number of years. Your power only comes from people knowing that you're an honest broker, and that you think that there's something larger than yourself that you're doing.
Yeah. Yeah. So you use words like trust and people relying on you and honest. Those are big words in business, right? Big words. How do you get there as a boss? What are the behaviors? What does your team actually see from
you? Look, and I would say, like, the risk of doing an interview like this is thinking claiming that you know that you're doing it perfectly all the time. So, like, as you know, I don't.
That's the amazing thing about you, right? It goes back to ego. You know that there's some things that you do. You recognize what's important, but also that everybody is adapting, developing, and growing. So by no means do I think you're going to say that you're doing it perfectly. So in that spirit, though, when you're doing it well, what does that look like?
I think what it looks like is, first off, you're only as good as the information you're getting. And so you need really good information. So people need to know that they can tell you things, and that they can tell you when things are really messed up or when they messed up. And they need to know that you are not going to get upset about it, and that you're going to just say, okay, great, let's fix it. Right. Yeah, so that's one thing. Otherwise, your information faucet gets shut off and you don't know what's going on, or people are hiding things from you or lying. And then you make horrible decisions, right? So information is the most important thing. Creating a safe space for people to try and fail and fix means that you're going to get really big, great things out of people. And then attribute. Like, you have to make sure that everyone knows who did what, and be as thorough as you can, and you're going to forget to name people. But attribute all the time as matter of course. so that everyone knows that they're appreciated and that their work is being seen, and also it kind of engenders this culture of, hopefully, of everyone else acknowledging everybody else's efforts.
So one of the things, and you're probably not going to love that I say this, but I'm going to say it anyway, but one of the things I've always really loved about your approach is how much you believe what you're saying and how important these things really are to you. The try, the fail, the fix. Like, you believe that. You know that. You hear a lot of leaders say, oh, we can't be a risk-averse culture. And then the moment somebody takes that risk and fails and costs some amount of money, they lose their job. So we can say it all we want, but unless we follow through with that, that doesn't create the culture of taking chances and thinking big and innovating. Can you think of some opportunities or some stories where you've worked with someone on your team that you've allowed them to try, they failed, they fixed it, and the payoff on the back end was exciting or good or innovative or new?
I'll give you a general example is on any given series that we launch, right? Yes. We think of it as our mission to advance what animation's doing. So that means you're trying new things. And on any given series, you sort of believe in the creator. You have to give them the room to do what they do and their voice to come through. And then you have to give the internal teams here the latitude to know that we as unique as we try to be in the content we choose to make, we try to launch it as uniquely as possible too. And in any given series launch, we think one thing is going to pop and get everyone's attention when usually it's some other thing. So an example would be we rebooted Powerpuff Girls a number of years ago. We all thought that we did this big parade with big inflatable Powerpuff Girls, and we thought that was going to take off. What took off was an avatar maker that was online to Powerpuff yourself. And why that took off was because the creative team and the marketing team was smart enough to say that the number of ways to represent skin color and hair and religious affiliation, all of that needed to be baked into. You needed, no matter who you were on Earth, you needed to be able to make an accurate representation of yourself. So then the creative team handmade all those things. That thing totally took off. It trended on Twitter, was number one. Or when we launched Rick and Morty a couple seasons ago, we sent an episode into space and premiered it from space. But really, it was another thing we did at the same time with that Rick and Morty launch that totally connected and took off. So you put a couple irons in the fire, and it's okay if one even costs more and took more effort and failed, so long as you have something that worked, out of it.
So it's also another really great reason why my 3 kids think you have the coolest job in the history of the world. You're playing Rick and Morty from space. It just reinforces why they think you're the coolest.
I know. It's funny how normal it is for us to have meetings about, okay, how are we going to send this into space? Is it helium? Is it, there's a person in the desert that can do this. And then what are the permits you need to get, et cetera?
Yeah, that's just crazy. It's so normalized for you. That's awesome.
It's so normalized for us, and also stressful. Like, there are cartoon emergencies. Like, I dread looking at my phone on the weekends to see what the emergency is. And it's like, thank God I'm not in a real job.
I'm pretty sure it's a real job. I'm pretty sure it's a real job.
It's a real job. Yeah.
It's definitely a real job, and you do it very, very well. There's a lot going on in the world these days, and you kind of alluded to it earlier in our conversation. It is hard to be the boss, and in a lot of ways, bosses, as they should be, are under microscopes, and there's a lot changing in how business is getting done, and there's a lot changing in your space. How are you navigating and reconciling all of these different things that are very, very different than what they were 15 years ago?
Culturally, everything has shifted over the last 5 years. And especially a young workforce is looking for the workplace to be a place where the changes happen, right? Second, there's huge uncertainty especially in media, the sector I work in, where the business model has completely shifted, and there's not really the exact replacement for the business model we had right now. Mm-hmm. So we're all sort of guessing at what's next. And third, the wider uncertainty. Young people are wondering what their relationship is to capitalism or work, or And then, I mean, not to add a fourth, but AI, other massive tectonic changes coming. So in all that uncertainty, my only approach is to try and be a source of certainty, which is like, I don't know what the heck's going on. I don't know how we're going to react. All I know is how I'm going to behave, how I'm going to behave under pressure, how I'm going to behave when there's an emergency. I'm just going to be as calm as I can be, not look for blame, and I'm just going to be the Michael you know. And everything else can change, but I'm not going to change my approach. Now, I'm going to change my approach in some ways because I've got to learn about things and ways of being in the world that I hadn't considered before. And I have to think about how we're all impacting each other's lives and in different ways. All that I am changing and trying to do the growth on that and trying to learn as much as I can from especially the youngest parts of the people that come and work here. We have a benefit here at Cartoon Network and Adult Swim in that the people that come and work here tend to have grown up watching the stuff we make. Mm-hmm. And so we've kind of helped raise them. Yeah. And so there's kind of a cultural connection that we already have before they start working here. And so what that helps is them shaping our culture, I think, more rapidly than maybe in some other companies. I like to think that that's true. They probably don't think that's fully true, but I bet it's more true than it is for other companies.
How do you hold yourself accountable to slowing down and listening? A lot of it, I think, is about, like you talked about consistency, you talk about hearing, you talked about asking good questions. How do you make sure you're doing that?
One thing I underestimate is how much me talking can shut other people up. Right? And it's because I'm just like, it's just me, you guys, it's just me. And I don't think of the title or even my job position at all. I'm just hanging out with you guys and we're figuring stuff out. So I made a conscious effort this year to, at the end of any meeting I'm in, no matter who the group is, to go, okay, I didn't hear from you. What is it? Or does anybody else have anything? I very consciously try to create like a 5-minute awkward anything else, so that people know that they have, we need to hear from them. Mm-hmm. I'll do one-on-ones at the end and the beginning of any given year across all the groups that work here. And I keep notes. And so I try to do that twice a year. We're still not fully recovered from working from home in terms of like information moving around and people knocking things off each other and all that. I had to, during COVID, like everybody did, make more effort that way. I'm keeping it going. Even though we're coming into the office 3 days a week, I'm keeping it going because I think we find it valuable. I found it valuable. I don't know if they did, but it made me aware of sensitivities or things going on that I wouldn't have known about. And people don't edit themselves. They come to those with the hard questions and the real stuff. They're not editing when they talk to me about it.
Well, I know, and you can talk a little bit about your office space too, because I think people would enjoy hearing about that. But in general, you have the coolest office building in the history of the world, perhaps. And one of the things that I assume would be hard is sort of losing some of that culture during, I know, it's pretty cool. But losing some of that culture during COVID and work from home, and then also the challenges of getting people back into the space, but also recognizing how impactful that space was. And that's just for people that are watching, that's just a little piece of it. It's pretty stinking cool. I mean,
it's like a museum to animation. So I'm looking at a arcade game and a giant Rick and Morty statue.
So what do you think was the biggest challenge going from leaving this space that is so much a part of what you are, going to work from home, then bringing everybody back and sort of figuring it out? What is the new normal? Where did you, what worked really well, or what challenges did you find in all that?
All of media changed during COVID, or more accelerated change, I think, in terms of consumption habits. So we had 2 or 3 cascading bits of change happening. And while we were away from the building, I think the building started to loom larger in everyone's head as this is the point of our culture. So I had to recalibrate everyone and say, no, we are the point of our culture, and our culture in some ways needs to evolve, or our work product needs to evolve, and how we operate needs to evolve. So being able to come back was great, but it also made everyone kind of just want to go back to the exact ways they were. So we had to all jointly, and I think we're now here. We all had to figure out what is worth keeping, both in the building and metaphorically, and what do we have to throw out, both very literally and both metaphorically, and what are the new things we need to bring in. And part of what was good about this was, historically, the Cartoon Network people lived across the highway. Actually, they worked in a different building. And at the beginning of this year, we said, no, we're one family, we're one team. We were close cousins. Now it's like we're all a nuclear family now. You guys come over here. And it just is so much more fun with everybody in one building. It's so much happier and warmer and more fun, and aesthetically a little bit less cluttered than it was before, but while still being completely insane with, a giant big characters every 2 feet in every hallway.
It's amazing how where you are, what you do, and who you are all kind of comes together to create the values of the team and the content that you put out in the world. It's pretty cool.
Look, and that's the thing, like whatever I do next, if I do anything next, it's got to be something I believe in, and it's got to be that the people I'm working with are in it for all the right reasons. A thing I don't get is when people have a different playbook than this playbook, when people are sharp-elbowed or political, or think that succeeding and leading is by demolishing someone else, or stealing something from someone else's career. I just don't I don't have the energy for that. I don't even get that. I just so don't want to do that. And I've been so lucky to be here for 30 years, where largely that doesn't get anyone anywhere.
Yeah. But I'm guessing you've had people that have come onto your team that you've had to manage, that you see some of those behaviors and you've had to work with them to change pretty quickly. How do those conversations go?
Yeah. So early on in our culture, in the late 90s, we would start to, in our interview process, say, hey, look, the one thing that won't work here is assholes. I don't know if I can say that on this podcast, but
you sure can.
Jerks.
Sure can. Nope, we're going with assholes.
Yeah. Okay, the only thing that won't work here for you is if you're an asshole or if you're political. Like, I'm warning you now in the interview process. Like, we very much would say that. And then if someone, and we were really bad at sussing out who was going to be the asshole. Like, the interview process, I bet you have better ways to do this than we do, because we would just talk to people for an hour and then they'd meet like 5 other people. It turns out assholes are really good at convincing 5 or 6 people in the day of interviews that they're not assholes. So then when later they turn out to be assholes, it would take us about 6 to 8 months to process that person through. But at first we would say, hey, look, remember in the interview when we said assholism doesn't work, being negative towards other people or trying to pit people against each other or whatever, the Machiavellian stuff you're trying to do wouldn't work, and we've noticed it. So please stop. And there's an easier way. And most all of them were unable to change who they are. And most all of them. And so it would take about 5 to 6 months to process them out. And over time, the other thing is most people don't leave here voluntarily. In fact, hardly anyone has ever left here because they wanted to move on. It's I'd say 90% of people only left here involuntarily, sadly. So what that means is if you can do that for 20 to 30 years, you only end up with gem people. You know what I mean? And you really know who you're working with. Yeah.
Is there anyone, and again, keep the name to yourself, but is there anyone in your 30-year history of somebody that did turn the corner?
It really isn't. And wow. I have to say that, and I think you and I have talked about this in the past, actually, where my bias is I'm going to give someone a second shot and a third shot. And like, I kind of take too long sometimes, even if I know it's wrong. And that's been a hard thing for me. I think part of that's rooted in a lot of the time being a creative director, because you reward yourself in creative direction if you give somebody or some idea a second and third chance. Sometimes it blooms.
Yeah.
But in managing people, I sadly have found that if after 2 conversations it hasn't changed, then something else is going on.
Yeah. Yeah.
The person may not be a horrible person, but there's something fundamentally wrong with the position they're in, or what you think they should be operating on and what they think they should be operating on.
Yeah, it's fit and role, right? It's not that they're not the right person for another organization, another team, another place, but fit and role, this one doesn't work.
Yeah, and I'd say this is the first time this dawning on me in this conversation is, if they orient themselves in, I need more authority here. And it seems like most of the people who have failed in this culture and at this place came in, got the job, a month in, they're like, I need more authority here. Not happy with the authority they start with. And we don't orient that way. We're sort of about, what's the output? Like, what are we making together? Not
collaboration, innovation, influence, not authority.
Not authority. Authority is earned over time. It's not given.
Yeah. But I would even say, and again, correct me if I'm wrong, but I would say it's earned, not given, but I think you still acclimate and your team goes to collaboration, influence, and not, I mean, even when it's earned, yes, but I think you go towards the, how are we going to do this together? How do we create influence so people can buy into our ideas, and it doesn't matter whose idea it is.
100% that. 100% of that. Yes. Yeah. No, irregardless of title or role or length of being here, it's like, who's got the best idea in the room right now? Yeah.
And let's get really excited by whoever's it is.
Yes. Yeah. And if it's not your idea, that doesn't take anything away from you.
For the people on your team over the years, and I don't mean team right now, but for the people that you've seen just thrive, come into your the organization, adapt, adjust, and thrive, what do you think those people recognize? What do you think those people did? And I want you to think about that. Any of our listeners who are out there integrating into a new role that may be different, maybe unique, what do you think? What do you think they can do to sort of integrate in and thrive?
Coming into a place and a culture, spending time learning, asking questions, not acting like you know the answers to things, and or acting like you have to demonstrate your value. I think that always works. And taking the time and then building the relationships with other people and the trust, and offering to help, and doing the work, and actions, not words. I do think being able to write and present and speak to your work matters a lot. I think that helps a lot. I think those are very useful tools. And then finally, the ability to notice when something's wrong or something could be done better, and not treating that like you're being able to call that out in a way that doesn't seem vituperative or like you're showing off, or you're punching at another group or another person, right? Mm-hmm. So if all of those recommendations come from, hey, I wonder if we can do this better, like, then that's great. That means that person's pulling for the whole organization, trying to make everything better, versus trying to call out other people's shortcomings and look better by doing that, which doesn't ever work.
I often get calls from early career professionals or college students taking their first job, and they're asking me questions about, how do I create my path forward? How do I ask for promotion? How do I do these things? I'm like, you've been in your job a month. The first thing, and I'm sure you've had this conversation with your son, who I know is entering one of the sons is entering the work world. But the first thing I say is deliver, do the job.
That's it.
Do the job.
That's it. I've never asked for a promotion. In fact, I've oftentimes asked to not be promoted.
You're unique in that way, though. You're unique in that way.
If you do the job and do the work, you'll get promoted. And this is true on shows too. So like if there's a storyboard artist who's really good, we'll eventually go to that storyboard artist and go, do you have an idea for your own show? The work creates the opportunity. Yeah. And if it doesn't, then I think it's worth sitting down with your manager and going, look, I feel like I'm doing the work, but what am I missing? What more can I do?
Yeah. The rest, so the other things I took down was observe and care and relationship and listen and learn and be solution oriented and be curious, which are all great. And you work your way to all of those things. But the first thing is do the job, deliver.
100%. And early on in your career, the best thing you can do is build relationships with your peer set, because they're going to go and do other things, and you're going to have a support system always, and you'll have job opportunities always. The point in the early part of your career shouldn't be about promotions. It should be, who are the best people you're surrounding yourself with?
Yeah. And that's hard to think about the impact today as a 20-something first job, and the impact on what that's going to look like to you in your career 15, 10, 5, 7, 30 years from now.
Yeah. It's the same as learning to put away money in your 401k early because of the compounding interest. It's the exact same thing. Invest early in your 401k and in your peers, and the compounding interest on both those is incredible.
I love that. So last question for you as we wrap up. So the world is changing. Leadership over the last 10 years looks very different than it looks today, and it's going to look in the next 10 years. So when you think about yourself, when you think about how you show up, think through and close us out with, what are the things you think you need to start, stop, and continue to do to adapt and adjust as the leader that you are? You
know me well enough to know that I probably haven't done enough work on this. So
that's not true. I don't buy it.
I don't know. So I need to start figuring out where I can have impact next, and take everything that I've learned and apply it somewhere. And the thing I'm internally wrestling with is, but does anyone need to hear from me anymore? Like, that is kind of always my voice. So I need to start figuring out where I can have impact and give myself a little bit of credit. So stop. I worry about ruffling people's feathers and being difficult. And sometimes, and I'm never difficult, but sometimes that impedes my efficacy. So I need to stop that. I need to stop worrying about that. And then continue. I think I need to continue and amplify thinking it's not about me. Like, I think that's pretty much the greatest of my superpowers is that I don't ever think it's about me. And I think that all leaders should not think of it as leading, and think of it as serving.
Well, and it's interesting, your start and your stop amplify your continue, which is not about you. It's like, how do I make sure that I'm passing on the knowledge that I have? Clearly not for ego, but for generations to come. How do I stop getting in my own way and maybe not giving the feedback or not doing the thing because it's the right thing? So it's fascinating how it all comes together. And I would just say, I would add to that is, how do you continue or help or enhance, build future leaders who think like you do? Because we clearly need more of it. You might not like that or agree with me, but I say it.
No. Well, I just always, and this is advice you've given me. I presume that by leading by example, everyone's going to get it. But you've kind of taught me that, no, I have to underline it. And so now lately I'm just like, hey, notice we just had an emergency on a hit show. We did. And you can all go read about it. And it took many months. I think we are in a really good spot with it. But we're only in a good spot with it because we sat in this conference room right over here almost every week and said, okay, how do we handle this? What do we do? I would throw out dumb ideas. Let's do a contest to replace the voices or whatever. And my team or the show unit would be like, that's stupid. Like, let's not do that. And so I was open-minded, listened, and we all have the call. So just this week I said, guys, I think we're okay. I think we're on the other side of this. And I just want to underline, it's the culture we all created together that has allowed us to get through this problem. And so just acknowledge it. And we need to all thank each other and make sure we keep this culture going, because it can get us through the worst thing.
I'm not making assumptions that they get that, but being really articulate and intentional about it. Yeah.
Yeah. You gave me that advice.
So, hey, that was really good advice. There you go.
It is.
Well, on that note, I want to thank you so much for joining me today. That was really fun, and I'm positive that our listeners are going to pull a large amount of insight out of this conversation. So thank you so much for joining me.
Thank you.
Thanks, Michael. What I'm left with is, what are you explicitly underlining? Is it culture, future leaders, serving and lifting the leaders up? And lastly, of course, investing in your 401k and your peers. That's the support network that's going to be with you for years to come. This is Unfolding Leadership. Thanks for listening.